Hi, Bob. How are you? How are you? It's good to see you.
Oh, yeah, I'm fine. I'm doing well.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah.
We've got Lindsay, our mutual friend Lindsay is on.
Okay,
And
hi,
so she
Lindsay.
may be giving comments. We've got a couple other
Okay.
people on too. And Bob, it's just great to see you.
It is, yeah, well, I feel the same way. This is, yeah, we've done good stuff together.
We have. We used to do a daily show. No, not a daily show. I think it was a weekly show. And we
Yeah,
called it
weekly show.
Playing for Keeps. Was that what we called it all those years ago?
I think that was, at one point we called it that, and then we changed it to something a little more
Voices.
directly related to peace, something
Voices of
peace
Peace
related.
or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah,
But one of
something
the
like
reasons,
that, yeah.
one of the reasons that we chose Voices of Peace for the show title was because you are a peace journalist, and I'm wondering if you could tell people what peace journalism is all about. What makes it peace journalism, not just journalism?
All right. Well, yeah, it's a concept in progress in terms of understanding. There's no set objective definition of peace journalism. I came upon the term. There's transcendmedia.org is the website. A man named Johan Galtung, who I believe lives in Australia, but I think he's Swedish, coined and developed this term. And and as soon as I saw those words, peace journalist, I said, this is who I am. I've been a peace journalist all my life. I've been a journalist since the 70s. So what is that? About 40 years now. That's the length of this career I've had. And to not simplify the term, I would say, okay, well, basically, a peace journalist is someone that looks at all sides of an issue, of a conflict issue, although it's beyond just conflict to life itself. But I would also say it's very important, and this is something that that the media falls short of for the most part. Peace journalism reports the complex story. In other words, conflict is never good guy, is always more than good guy and bad guy. It's always more than that. There's always, complexities and struggles, bad, impulse behavior on all sides, but also important points, values, things, needs. They're on all sides too. A peace journalist doesn't dismiss one side for the sake of, reporting another. That's an easy thing to do, and there's nobody that's perfect at that, but it's the awareness of the complexity that begins the process of peace journalism.
Yeah, it jives so well with what we do here. As you know, we at Raven are guided by mimetic theory, and one of the big issues of mimetic theory is scapegoating, which,
Absolutely.
as you're talking about peace journalism and trying to hear all sides, and how we kick some people out so that we don't have to hear their side of the story because it might make us uncomfortable. This is what scapegoating is all about, and you get to the heart of this in one of your recent articles called "Governing by Scapegoat." Can you tell us how you came up with this article? What led you to write this article?
Well, partly is that I am a fan of Rene Girard, even though I'm not an expert immersed in his writing. I know his theories, and and they're right on target. So I know about scapegoats, and and then we have the Trump administration, and in recent weeks and months, immigration has really come up as an issue, with the threat of, removal of rescinding DACA, kicking the Dreamers out. And then all of the earlier things, the Muslim ban, the hideous language about Mexicans as rapists and all that kind of stuff, that just that one identifies with Donald Trump. So it's always there. But the recent issues with DACA and the problem of illegals, was in my consciousness. So I'm grabbing hold of a column, I'm looking for my column for the week, and that seems to be something that's very important to address. And so I started looking at, well, what is going on here? Okay, what's really going on here is governing by scapegoat. That's the name of the column. And governing has this simplistic, militaristic quality. The essence of scapegoating is going to war and saying that the enemy is out there. They are evil beyond evil, and they're going to kill us unless we kill them first. And so we rally, and what this accomplishes when you are the leader of a country, and maybe you're a leader of a country that has troubles, and maybe part of the trouble is directed at you. You're being blamed. This happened on September 11th, 2001. The whole Bush presidency was not legitimate. He didn't win the election, and there was a lot of investigation going on about, even, the mainstream media was looking at the Florida election results. Maybe Bush didn't even win the Florida election. And in fact, that is the case. But before that happened, 9/11, God's new Pearl Harbor comes to save George Bush, and we have an enemy, and it's the Taliban, and it's Al Qaeda, and all those terrible, terrible people. But eventually, it morphs into Osama morphs into Saddam Hussein, and the war on terror is underway, and it's still going on 16 years later. So we've moved from one scape to another, to another, to another. We kill the guys, but the problems still continue because the problems are of our making, and on we go. And, and so, well, the point that I made with the column is that while the war continues, and we need to keep waging the war in order to keep the economy going, it's not working that well as a scapegoat. Nobody, hates the Afghans anymore. Nobody knows who's, in charge of that country, because it keeps shifting and changing, and the same with Iraq, and the same with all the other countries we find ourselves involved in one way or another, whether it's Syria or Yemen or whatever. So Donald Trump is in lots of trouble, as a leader. He needs a scapegoat. And we don't, while we're still at war is not satisfying the need for a scapegoat. Right. Because of the Black Lives Matter movement, and all the videos showing the horror of police shootings, it's not that easy to have a domestic scapegoat either. So my theory is the best, the least defended people out there are immigrants, especially quote unquote illegal immigrants. So they're Donald's scapegoat of choice.
And he needs a scapegoat because of the Russia probe. Your comments on 9/11 made me think instantly of Russia, and we need a distraction from this. So who are we going to find, a scapegoat that we can all unite against?
Right. Yes, that's what he's reaching for. And I would say it's the Russia probe. It's the fact that he lost the election by a much larger, margin than Bush did. And that his support is at 33, 34, 35%. It's very low. He's governing a faction, not the country.
Yeah.
He's, so he's desperate to unite the country around him with the enemy that Donald Trump will help us, defeat.
So what do we do with with Donald Trump? What do we like? What is this? What like he wants to have a sense that people are united behind him, but there are policies that I just don't like. How do we not scapegoat this man, right?
Scapegoat Donald
Yeah,
himself.
yeah.
Very, very, that's a question that goes to the heartland.
Yeah.
Come on, I'm not going to be scapegoating anybody. I'm a good guy.
Right. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right, and I do think about things like that. Well, to what extent am I scapegoating, President Trump? Awareness has to always be in the picture. Awareness of the possibility. And that's why for myself, I am not necessarily a fan of impeaching Donald Trump. To put all your energy on that and how bad he is with the Russians and all that is, to my mind, the essence of the mainstream effort to scapegoat Trump. He is so bad, 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 and the Russians are bad. They went and they bought ads on Facebook. They are so bad. Right. So I think that's part of it. I hold in check the whole Russia investigation. Let them find. I know there's something going on that needs to be found and outed. That I'm aware of. I don't know that impeachment is the right idea. What is needed is profound, long-term, widespread, and complex change, not dumping Trump so that we get Michael Pence or Paul Ryan as president. That's not the answer.
Yeah, yeah. So in your article, well, Trump brought up. I want to bring up the State of the Union. Really quickly, because he brought up a lot of issues that for me look like this scapegoating thing that we're talking about. So he'll bring up this gang MS-13.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So that's the Mexican gang that's the gang that he says is coming from Mexico and coming in to try to kill all of us, right?
Yeah. Right.
And I hear liberal commentators, actually I shouldn't label them as liberal. I hear experts saying that MS-13 is not as big of a threat as Donald Trump is leading on.
Right.
That's not to de-emphasize the pain that they have caused the family members that showed up at the State of the Union. But you mentioned in your article that violence is a plague in the United States.
Yes.
And so part of what I want to be able to call Donald Trump out on is this kind of scapegoating of violent gangs. That sounds really bad, but what I mean by that is exactly what you said about scapegoating. Oh, all of the violence is over there on the gangs. It has nothing to do with us white, middle, upper class men. It has nothing to do with us. It's all about them, those brown people over there who are trying to come over the border and take over all of our cities. Like you mentioned in your article about all of the school shootings that have been happening that gets no play in mainstream media. We've had 11 school shootings? Like this isn't like violence, as you say, is a plague that that threatens the United States. It's not just them over there.
Right. Yeah. Unless the shooter has a Muslim surname or something like that, then it's terrorism. Suddenly it's terrorism. But if it's just a white teenage boy, that kills, a couple of kids, which, happened, a week ago, as I'm beginning the process of writing my column on immigration, I happened to see a news item about a shooting in Kentucky, Benton, Kentucky, a small town in Kentucky, a rural high school. A 15-year-old boy just comes into before school starts, the kids are hanging out in the atrium, and he just starts firing until he runs out of bullets, 2 are dead, and I think there's like 20 injured or something like that. He runs out of bullets. He tries to escape, but he's caught. He's just he's a white kid, and it almost made no headlines at all. I didn't see it on the TV news that I watched at all. I saw nothing about it. It's a page 3 or page 5, a page 7 story, unless the dead are in double digits maybe, or it's terrorism. Yeah. And then we have to be scared. But we can't let ourselves just be scared of white teenagers. They don't work as scapegoats,
They're just lone wolves.
Yeah. They're a lone wolf. They're troubled loners. They're lone wolves, totally acting out of context. Yeah. It drives me nuts. I mean, the coverage I read about it was almost like sports coverage. First fatal mass shooting of 2018. Yeah. Wow, there it is. Only 2 dead. But then it points out all the other shootings. A couple miles away, there was a shooting at a high school that predated Columbine and da-da-da-da-da. And, okay, so, and also to go back to your earlier point about the M13 gang, it doesn't mean that a scapegoat guy is always innocent or always a harmless person. He may be a good villainous figure with a lot of, bad things to just point to, lovingly as how bad he is or how bad they are. But they're not us, and look what they're doing.
Right.
Look at how much worse they are than we are. Just because someone is a scapegoat doesn't mean they're model citizens,
yes.
That are getting a bad break. They can be very bad people.
Yeah.
Maybe Osama bin Laden was not such a great guy. Maybe Saddam Hussein, had a few blots on his record. But, the badder they are, the better they work as scapegoats.
Yes, absolutely. And this is one of the other issues that I have with blaming the immigrants. A lot of these people, they're no longer coming from Mexico. They're coming from Central America.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
And in Central America, the United States has had our hands in the political situations there. We've been promoting dictators there as opposed to democratically elected governors. And so this is one of the big causes for these gangs in Central America is the history of the United States and what we have done there, and that is getting no play anywhere in the media. It's like
whatsoever. That's part of the non-peace journalism media that won't look at anything like that. I think about the Russia investigation and the awfulness of how it interfered by, leaking emails that are real emails and buying ads on Facebook, buying ads on Scapegoat, I almost said. But compared to things we have done. In 1954, we overthrew, the CIA, overthrew the government of the democratically elected socialist, or democratic socialist government of Guatemala, Jacobo Arbenz. Got him, and put in hideous dictators that turned this, the country into a horrible, horrible right-wing dictatorship for decades and decades. This is how we have interfered with elections. And to cover the Russia thing without the least reference to us, except we're the model democracy of the world, is so, words escape me, it's so irresponsible.
Yeah.
It's so irresponsible. And, so Russia, beyond Trump, we get to look at Russia as our scapegoat again and get the darn Cold War going up again,
right.
That was so good to have that Cold War. We had to, that was the other thing. Preceding 9/11, there was this, problem that the Cold War had ended. So the communists who were under our beds for 50 years were gone. There were no communists. And who was our scapegoat enemy? So we spent several decades trying to come up with the scapegoating and finally terrorism, the war on terror. And then, of course, George Bush called it the axis of evil. And so we went after and started to wage a war on evil itself. We went from fighting communists to fighting evil. What a, so yeah, I guess you figure that'll take more than 16 years, I guess that's eternity going on.
Yeah, and I'll drop a quote from Rene Girard on you, who says, evil and violent measures to combat evil are essentially the same.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? So you become the monster that you try to defeat.
Yes, absolutely. Or as I like to say, in war, all the combatants are on the same side.
Yeah.
The other side are those who say, no, stop it. Stop killing people.
We're all on the side of violence. Yeah. Lindsay has a couple quotes or comments that I want to get in. We use Russia for a scapegoat. For sure. Not saying they're innocent, but they allow us to deflect from our own guilt. Boom. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she says, and of course, our own history and present of overthrowing governments gives context to Russiagate. But I also think about the way Russian interference is a scapegoat for the fact that we won't fix our own democracy. Trump's election is more a result of the faults of the Electoral College and the illegal purge of Africa.
Yes, absolutely. Right on, Lindsay. Absolutely. We have a very bad, very suspicious electoral system, and computer elections, computer voting does not have the safeguards. There's all kinds of ways in which low-income neighborhoods, African-American neighborhoods are targeted to limit and purge as many voters as possible. If we can't, as a Republican said once quite well, famously a number of years ago, we're going to lose this election unless we can limit the black vote. And, Republicans do not have a majority. And so they have to do a lot of extra stuff to maintain power in a democracy, which is really just a nuisance to people in power.
Democracy is a nuisance to people in power.
Yeah.
Lindsay, I'm sorry I didn't get your full quote in there. It didn't come up on my iPad. But you said the illegal purging of African American votes via cross-check, and she mentions also and the gutting of the Voting Rights Act. So
yes,
Bob, I'm feeling like there are a lot of problems in the United States right now. What can we do to make things better? What can we do to at least end this conversation on a there's so much light in the room that you are in right now, like a ray of light, a ray of hope for our future, or at least for the next 5 hours of my life.
Yeah. Okay. I as soon as you ask that, I'm trying to find a humorous answer, but I think we've gone through it all. Yeah, impeach Trump. That'll do it. No, that's a very crucial question. I struggle with that every week. I write a weekly column, and every week it's so much easier to address, a terrible issue of the moment. Whether it's a war related or, climate change related or racism related, all those things, or guns and violence, domestic shootings, police shootings, whatever. Those things are there, and there's always something to grab hold of and lament deeply in a column. It's very important to move beyond that. And there is a lot of light. There is a lot of hope. I agree with Dr. King. The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Mm-hmm. I believe that we are reaching for the future, and the future, we are reaching for the future that transcends an us versus them domination culture. To me, one of the primary rays of light and hope is called Restorative Justice. And I'm in the middle of attempting to write a book about the restorative justice movement in Chicago. But restorative justice, briefly, is justice that is based on healing rather than punishment. And that concept all by itself, just thinking about and reflecting on the nature of healing, punishment, once again, is creating a scapegoat. We have a bureaucracy based on endless scapegoating of bad people who, shoplift and sell drugs and beat other people up, and they do bad things. So we send them, and if they're minority people, we put them in the system for life so that they're always, at risk of being sucked by the system back into prison and what have you. That's the American's prison industrial complex. You might as well call it the scapegoat industrial complex. Something like restorative justice is a large-scale growing movement of people getting the fact that this doesn't work. And it's a movement growing in struggling, low-income urban neighborhoods more than anywhere else, because those neighborhoods are the ones most deeply wounded by the current system, most deeply wrecked. Those neighborhoods, and the movement grew out of indigenous people in northern Canada, in New Zealand, in places around the world, reaching and grabbing hold of the ancient tradition of the circle, people sitting in wholeness with valuing one another. That's where it has to start. And creating an infrastructure around that sort of thing, as opposed to killing the scapegoat of the moment. Right. That's our infrastructure, and it don't work. And we have to move beyond it. And I believe that is happening as well.
Yeah. You see it happening in a lot of places, especially in Chicago.
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, Bob, thanks so much for being here and for talking about these issues. It's so fun to see you again and talk about your columns.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic.
Well, thank you.
If people want to keep up with your work, where should we send them to?
commonwonders.com is the website.
Okay. And
so just check it out.
You mentioned a book on restorative justice that you're going to be having out here pretty soon. Do you have a date for that yet, or?
I at this point I have a working deadline of June, 6 months from now, but that's to get a draft done. Okay. So there's no date for a publication at this point.
Okay, and tell us
briefly
about your previous book.
The previous book is called Courage Grows Strong at the Wound. It's it's a collection of columns written mostly after the death of my wife in the late 90s, 1998, and raising a teenage daughter on my own, which was so it's very humorous in some senses, but it also moves beyond that into reaching out into the world to find peace, both inner and it's a reach for inner and outer peace is really the essence of the book. That's how I describe it.
It's a beautiful book. So I
thank you so much.
Go get it. So awesome. Well, thanks again, Bob. So great to have this conversation with you. So and I hope
absolutely
we do it again.
Thank you very much.
So.
Well, yeah, let's do it again soon.
Awesome. All right. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We are going to have another Raven Facebook Live here on the Facebook page next week. So you can stay up to date with all things Raven Foundation on Raven Foundation Facebook page and at ravenfoundation.org. So thank you so much, and we'll talk with you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.